Yay, we made it. Okay, Dr. Judy is enjoying her nice vacation, but here we are. We're going to discuss a hot topic today, which is something that I found very interesting when I was surfing the internet when we decided we were going to talk about training behavior and mental stimulation. And it's whether or not the breed, this study was on dogs, but I'm sure with cats, we can have a similar discussion, but specifically the breed of dog, whether or not that can predict behavior, because we've all heard the stereotypes of, a golden retriever is very friendly, or a German Shepherd is going to be more likely to be aggressive, things like that, that follow these certain breeds of dogs. And in 2022, almost a full year ago at this point, they actually did a pretty large scale study on this topic about breeds of dogs using purebreds, mutts, owner surveys, and they also did a couple cool things to try to figure out what we impose on our dogs via stereotypes. So this is a research article that is titled Ancestry Inclusive Dog Genomics Challenges Popular Breed Stereotypes. And their conclusion, which I'm going to read their conclusion, and then we're going to go back and talk about the whole study, how they did it, how they came to this conclusion, etc. But their conclusion was that in their ancestrally diverse cohort, they are able to show that behavioral characteristics ascribed to modern breeds are polygenic, which means there's just multiple genes influenced, environmentally influenced, and found at varying prevalence in all breeds. So the 8 characteristics that they talked about, this is really comprehensive, by the way. If you want to download, we'll put the link, because they have charts and all sorts of stuff. But the different traits that they were testing for were, number one was human sociability, which was how comfortable the dog was around people, especially those that are unfamiliar to them. The second thing was how easily stimulated the dog is across contexts. So they called this the arousal level. Number 3 was toy-directed motor patterns, which is how much the dog displayed motor patterns, particularly towards toys. Number 4 was biddability, which is actually how readily the dog was responding to human direction in the context of training, how trainable the dog is. 4 was agonistic threshold, which was how easily the dog was provoked by frightening or uncomfortable stimuli. Number 6 was dog sociability, how comfortable the dog is around other dogs, especially those that are unfamiliar. Number 7 was environmental engagement, how interactive the dog is with its daily environment. And they ranked that from highly engaged to low engagement. And then number 8 is proximity seeking, whether they were affectionate to aloof, how readily the dog solicits human contact and closeness. So they really were trying to identify whether or not these 8 behavioral characteristics were related to specific breeds. So they surveyed owners of 18,385 dogs. About half, 49%, were purebred, and they sequenced the DNA of 2,155 dogs. And they realized that most behavioral traits are heritable in some fashion. So does our dogs and our breeds do determine certain behavioral traits? However, behaviors only subtly differentiate breeds, and breed offers little predictive value for individuals. It explains just 9% of variation in behavior. So we put a lot of stock, I think, in general, on breed of dog and how we think that will impact their behavior. And this study is saying, no, they're only explaining about 9% of variation in behavior to breed. And knowing breed ancestry can make behavioral predictions somewhat more accurate, but it depends on the behavior and it depends on the breed. And I'll go into, they have some examples of breeds that they could predict with higher accuracy how they would act behaviorally. The breed ancestry of individual dogs was assumed to be predictive of temperament and behavior. So that was the theory that they were testing. Okay. So, the cohort of all these surveys and data that they collected, they said was broadly similar to the United States dog population. About half of those reported were purebred, the other half were mixed breeds. Okay. I'm going to jump to some of the interesting results. So I already read over the 8 factors. They combined the genetic and survey data for 1,967 dogs, and they found that genetic variation explained more than 25% of the variation in factor scores for human sociability, toy-directed motor patterns, and bidability, which is the responsiveness to commands. Physical traits were exceptionally heritable, with 5 out of 8 exceeding 85% heritability. So basically, breed does strongly dictate what the physical traits will be. So size is a physical trait. If we think about it, a Chihuahua is generally speaking going to be a lot smaller than something that has Great Dane genes. Um, they found that behaviors related to intrinsic motor patterns and physical traits were more heritable than the other behaviors. Age, which they also test for, like age, size, some other sex was the other factor. So they said age explains little of the variation in behaviors. But for 2 factors, which were arousal level and toy-directed motor patterns, which kind of makes sense, right? Our older dogs are not going to get excited as easily as our young puppies with toys and things that are more activity driven. So that makes sense. They said that sex had little effect on any of the behaviors except for lifts leg to urinate. So males were more likely to do that than females. Although we have had plenty of female dogs that lift their leg to urinate as well. And size had virtually no effect on these behaviors, the variation in behaviors. Behavioral factors showed high variability within breeds, suggesting that although breed may affect the likelihood of a particular behavior to occur, it's not alone informative enough to predict an individual's disposition. So we can't make those blanket statements that says, oh, you're getting a golden retriever, we can guarantee that it's going to be an affectionate dog. We can't make that blanket statement because the breed is not that strongly related to behavior in all cases. No behaviors were exclusive to any breed. So all of these breeds were varying levels of human social, dog social, whatever all the other things were, willing to or engaged, willing to be with humans. So all of the breeds showed some level of these behaviors. So none of them were exceptionally special in that regard. Older dogs scored nearly as composed in their arousal levels as the most composed breed, which was the Great Pyrenees. So again, that was one of the special cases where they said age did dictate some of the more probable behaviors we would see. And puppies are far more toy-directed in their motor patterns than one of the most toy-directed breeds, which is the German Shepherd dog. Again, we know puppies, they're built to play. They, generally speaking, love toys. That makes sense. But they said for all the other different behavioral factors, age wasn't a good indicator. Just those 2. So then they actually grouped breeds by their proposed working role as captured by the AKC. So this was interesting. They grouped them in the AKC groups and tested these likelihoods of behavioral traits. So the herding breeds were more toy directed, more biddable, which is trainable, they take direction, more engaged, and more aloof. So they did see more of those behaviors in the herding group. The toy breeds, this will make me laugh. The toy breeds were more independent and less dog social. So some of these stereotypes are a little true. But it doesn't mean, again, that we can say just because they are that breed that it's guaranteed the individual will turn out that way. But there was more likelihood for toy breeds to be more independent and less dog social. The sporting breeds were more toy directed and the working breeds were more dog social. So again, kind of makes sense. They kind of fits the stereotypes that we have assigned for those breeds. Breeds that were ranked high on ease of training tended to be more biddable. So that was basically just the owner that was submitting the survey when they said that they were easier to train. It was generally speaking correlating to being more biddable and more toy directed. Breeds that were ranked as low on energy level were more composed, more dog social, and less environmentally engaged, which I thought that was interesting. Um, so our cultural breed stereotypes, so this is what we think of these certain breeds, affect the perception of a dog's behavior and thus may alter a dog's environment or introduce rater bias into the owner survey responses. So they were saying that because some of this data was collected from owner surveys of, what is your dog's breed or what do you think the mixed breed is and what are some of the characteristics that fit your dog, and their theory was that we actually put our own stereotypes on our own dogs, and so we may think if we have a Chihuahua and a German Shepherd in our own household, we may rank our Chihuahua as being more people friendly than the German Shepherd, even if they were objectively similar levels of friendliness, just because we project our own stereotypes onto the breeds. So I thought that was interesting. So they measured whether breed influences behavior through genetics by examining only mutts with less than 45% ancestry from any single breed. And these are multiple ways of breaking down the same data. So that's why I'm going through the whole thing, because these are all fascinating. But I highly recommend downloading the whole paper to get all of the facts and figures if you think this is interesting too. So this was specifically looking at mutts, and they were trying to take some of that bias out of it, because if the owner didn't even really know what their dog's breed was, then they were hypothesizing that maybe they would be less likely to place certain stereotypes on their dog in the survey results. So they basically found mixed results where for some of these traits, breed does have an influence, and for some of them it really doesn't. So for example, mutts that had a border collie ancestry tended to be more biddable, which is trainable. They take cues. Owners of confirmed golden retrievers tended to disagree that their dogs were fearful of unfamiliar people. This does fit the breed stereotype that we think of for golden retrievers, that they are friendly to strangers. However, when they were identifying mutts with golden retriever ancestry, that had no effect on this question. Interesting. And that suggests that the reported propensity may not be driven by genetics. They also saw that owners of confirmed Labrador retrievers tended to describe their dogs as more human social, which again is in line with the stereotype that Labradors are really friendly. However, in mutts, Labrador retriever ancestry had little effect. Owners of confirmed border collies tended to score their dogs higher on wants to play. Again, this is consistent with the stereotypes we have with border collies. But discordant with the LMER results, which find no effect of border collie ancestry. By analyzing the effect of ancestry on behavior in mutts, we can anticipate the likely behavioral propensities of breeds that are not well represented in their survey data. So, for example, St. Bernards was a breed that they didn't have a ton of data on. But they said that St. Bernard ancestry correlates with being more affectionate, and Shar ancestry with being less toy directed. Ancestry from Chesapeake Bay Retrievers increases with propensity to damage doors and escape from enclosures. I think that's funny when it's like there's something that a breed is very known for. One of the things that made me laugh on here was they ranked levels of independence, and the Basset Hound was like so far off the chart, and that made me laugh because I have met many a Basset Hound that are just the most independent creatures I can think of in the dog world. Okay. So, they also just finishing up, they found that a large proportion of both the genetic and environmental contributions to behavior remain undiscovered. There are a lot more questions than answers, where it's mixed in with how we treat our dogs because we think that their breed has a certain characteristic associated with it. Sometimes the stereotypes are accurate, and that is how the dogs got their stereotype. But at the end of this survey, it does point out the little timeline of how longs in general dogs have existed in history and how short in that timeline we have been trying to breed them for these certain characteristics. So it's much more likely that we are able to treat our pets like individuals, and the environment that they're raised in and the different things that they are exposed to, that really plays a much larger role. But for some of these things like biddability, which is the listens to takes direction, listens to commands, that is definitely, there are some breeds that are more biddable than others, and there's some breeds that are more independent than others. So again, this was called the Ancestry Inclusive Dog Genomics Challenge. Challenges popular breed stereotypes. And it's very interesting. It's 15 whole pages. I just picked out some highlights to prove both that, yes, sometimes the stereotypes are correct, sometimes they're completely wrong. But if you're interested in a specific breed, they have lots of charts and tables and things you can dig in, and you can see how much it may or may not impact your breed. Again, some of them really fit the stereotypes. Like when I saw Basset Hounds and Independence, I was like, yeah, of course. That one's just true. If it was Basset Hounds and likelihood to steal a loaf of bread, then I would say that one would also be through the roof for all my Basset Hound lovers out there. So in short, a small amount of our pets' behavior does come from their breed, and some characteristics it's more correlated than others. But in general, our pets are individuals. It depends how they're raised, how they're fed. Behavior is a really complicated topic. So we hope that you guys enjoyed a little sprinkling of training, mental stimulation, and behavior for the month of March. We will be live again on Friday, actually, talking about the Healthy Dog Expo with Dr. Lori Kozier. So we'll post about that. And next week, Dr. Judy is back. She's back from vacation, and we're ready to roll. Okay. Can somebody do whatever you do? Oh, we're all okay. I don't know what happened next. Is the mic still on?